Let's talk a little bit about warming up our bodies and making sure that we're prepared to do the types of movements that we do in pole dance, aerial acrobatics, chair balance, standing acrobatics, and other types of circus or movement arts. My name is Jolene Teresa. I have been doing dance, gymnastics, cheerleading, circus pretty much since I could walk. And over the years, I've learned a lot about the human body and what truly needs to be warm in order to ensure that we're keeping our body safe. Now we're going to go over 5 specific movements, and you should always be doing a full warm-up and conditioning for your body, but here are a few things that often get skipped. First and foremost, let's talk about shoulders. Now, your shoulder blades or scapular mobility is going to be very important for the types of movement that we do. Your shoulder blades can go up and down, they can go out and in, they can go forward, which would be your hollow back, and back, which would be an arched back. Now we want to make sure that we're moving through all of these movements because we're going to use one, if not all, in the movements we do in movement arts. First, we want to get comfy with our shoulders moving. Reaching my arms overhead, I'm going to pull my shoulder blades up towards my ears and then pull them down towards my hips. So you can see that I'm trying to wear my biceps as earmuffs, and then I'm trying to pull my shoulders down as far as I can. Just learning what it feels like to push up and down. Bringing the arms down, the next thing I want to do is try to make my back as wide as possible. So the bottom of my shoulder blade is pulling outward, almost like I'm trying to look like I am a muscle man on Muscle Beach. And then I'm pulling them down and together. I'm not arching my back, I'm just pulling my shoulder blades together. So we separate them and we pull them together. Almost like I'm trying to be wider and then smaller. Wider and smaller. The last thing we want to do is separate them away from the spine and roll the shoulders forward. Then squeeze them together and roll the shoulders back. So this one's a little different because we are incorporating more of our back. Rolling the shoulders forward to hollow out the back. Squeezing the shoulder blades towards the spine to arch the upper back. So when we roll forward, we're pulling the shoulder blades away from the spine, and when we pull back, we're squeezing them towards the spine. Doing these movements a couple times will help you to understand your scapular movements so that we can do them in this conditioning. Now we have 2 exercises we're going to do this in. The first is a down dog. I'm getting into my down dog with my feet about hip distance, hands about shoulder distance. And your feet don't have to be flat on the floor for this, but you do want them a little further away from your hands than they normally would be, so that we can come into a plank with the shoulders stacked over the wrists comfortably. From my down dog, the first thing I want to do is squeeze the shoulder blades towards the spine, and then separate them away from the spine. I like to explain this as if you were flapping a giant set of wings. Once you're comfy with this movement, we're going to separate the shoulder blades away from the spine, pull the rib cage in, and come forward into a plank. So I should be in a full hollow body. Then I'm going to bend my knees, roll the shoulder blades back and down so they're squeezing together and I have an arch back. Press back into what would be a squat, push up, and come back into my down dog. So with my arms overhead, I'm pushing the ground away from my down dog. I'm thinking of separating the shoulder blades and coming forward into that plank with the shoulder blades separated away from the spine. Then I'm thinking of rolling the shoulders down to squeeze the shoulder blades together in the back towards the spine for my squat. And then when I come back up into my down dog, my shoulders are down and away from my ears, so I want to press them back up. So the full movement should be a nice forward shoulder roll as we're moving the shoulder blades away and towards the spine. So from the side, I have my nice wide down dog. I pull the shoulder blades away from the spine as I come forward into that hollow body. Then I roll the shoulder blades down and squeeze them towards the spine as I arch the back, bend the knees, and press back. I come up into my down dog by straightening the legs and then continuing to roll the shoulders forward so that I can do this movement again. I like to do about 3 to 5 of these, and if you're feeling really confident, you can reverse the movement by coming into the squat, plank, then down dog. They should not feel super complicated because it is a fairly simple movement, but if you're not used to moving your shoulder blades, it might feel really weird to start. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not difficult or challenging on the body, so make sure you keep that in mind. Doing a couple of these before we warm up can be really helpful for making sure that our shoulders are ready for a lot of the movements we're going to be doing. Our second conditioning is also going to involve a lot of shoulders, but we're going to start to incorporate some lat and serratus into this as well. I'm standing with my feet comfortably a little wider than shoulder or hip distance. I can bend them if needed, but preferably they're straight. And if my arms don't touch the ground, I want to put blocks underneath each of my hands. Now, as I do this, I want to try to get as flat of a back as possible. Keeping my head neutral, I'm going to think about making sure that my stance stays the same. So I'm not rocking back and forth. Everything stays the same, it's just my arms and shoulders moving. I'm going to start by pulling my shoulders up towards my ears, and you can see that my elbows bend, and then pulling my shoulders down towards my spine, and you can see that it almost pulls my chest forward a bit. So I reach up and then pull those shoulders down towards my spine, but down towards my hips as well. As I do this, I'm going to think about keeping my hands about shoulder distance. I'm going to reach the shoulders up towards the ears and then pull the elbows in towards one another. Then I'm going to straighten, push down. So again, if I feel like my back is hollowing to reach the floor, I really want to put some blocks in front of me so that I have a nice flat back here. As I reach the shoulders up, I pull the elbows together and the forearms towards the ground so I feel the engagement underneath my armpit but towards my back. And when I straighten, I'm opening the armpits and pulling the shoulders down. We usually do about 6 to 10 of these to really make sure that we're understanding the movement and that we're getting that lat serratus engagement underneath the armpit. As we pull the elbows together, we want to avoid leaning the weight forward because then we're just putting the weight in our arms. We should really feel this in our shoulders and upper, outer back. Now that we've covered our shoulders and upper back, let's talk about some hip things we could be doing. Now, you should be standard warming up your hips with squats, lunges, anything to warm up the muscles around your hips, including your hamstring, your quads, and your abs. But something that we kind of skip in a lot of movement arts is the fact that you're going to have to lift your legs either forward, to the side, or behind you for certain movements. So let's talk about what you can do for that. I want something aside of me, not in front of me. For me, that's going to be a pole, it could be a wall, or even a chair. Just something you can put some weight into. For starters, I want to bring my feet about hip distance. I'm going to tuck my hips, and then I'm going to pull my rib cage in. So not my belly button, my rib cage. I want to think about if someone were to punch me, I'm zipping up that rib cage, almost like a corset. Standing up nice and tall, shoulders are relaxed and they're out to the sides. So nice broad chest, standing up nice and tall. Leaning the weight into one foot with a slight external rotation to make sure that we can lean diagonally, because that's how most people walk. The other foot is going to come directly in front of me. I can put my hand on my hip and we're going to do this forward, to the side, and to the back. These are just simple leg lifts. Keeping my hip down, standing up nice and tall, pulling that rib cage in so my abs are engaged, I'm going to lift the leg as high as it goes without lifting my hip. I want that hip down. I'm going to squeeze and release. So I'm pulling through that quad. I'm using the abs to keep my body stable. I'm using the hip and the glute to lift and lower. My knee is facing the ceiling, and I'm just squeezing. We're going to do the same thing to the side, so with an external rotation in the hip, meaning the knee is still facing the ceiling when I lift up. I don't want to lean though. The goal is to keep everything stable and just lift that leg. We're going to do about 6 forward, 6 to the side, and 6 to the back. If that seems like too much, cut it to 3. If it seems like not enough, bump it up to 10. Now when we do the foot to the back, it's a little bit different. So I want to bring the foot behind me and then remember to retuck my hips, pull that rib cage in and stand up nice and tall, then straighten my leg. With my hips tucked, it should be really hard to lift that back leg. My knee is now facing forward or to the ground because I don't want to externally rotate. This will involve a lot of hamstring and lower glutes, which is how we lift the leg to pass it around the pole, or we lift a back leg in a split. So we want to make sure that we're really using hamstring and lower glutes. I like to put my hand on my belly here, and we don't want to lean forward. We don't want to arch the back. We want to think really tuck the hips, almost like we're restricting the movement of lifting that leg. And if you bend it, you're also kind of not doing the movement. Do these on both sides. They're super helpful for passing the leg around an object or for simply holding a split that involves lifting. Since we're talking hips, let's move on to our fourth movement. I'm going to come into a stag, which means one leg is behind me. The knee comes out from my hip, but the foot is behind me. The other leg is in front of me. I'm trying to make a 90-degree lunge, but seated on the floor. Once I find this double stag shape, I want to try to bring the front foot away from me and then adjust so that my knee is directly out from my hip and my foot is directly out from my knee, creating a 90-degree angle. Then as much as possible, I'm going to try to do that with the back leg so that I have a pinwheel shape going on. I like to flex my feet for this one, but you can also do it with pointed feet as well. Facing forward, trying not to reach my body forward if I can help it. If I need to, I'm going to reach my body to the side towards my top knee. So facing forward, I would want to sit upright. This is my front leg, my left leg. So I would take my left hand and reach it just outside of my left knee if sitting upright is just not comfortable. I don't want to hinge directly forward, I just want to come angled to the side. Finding that 90-degree angle, my back leg is going to do the work here. First thing I want to do is think about pulling my hip forward and towards the ground. I'm keeping everything on the ground here. I'm going to try to lift my knee through an external rotation. What we don't want to do is sit back to lift the knee. It should be really challenging to lift that knee. Again, simple, not easy. Framing my hands on the outside of my front leg to make sure I have a bit of stability. I can put blocks if I need them. I'm squeezing my outer glute to push the hip forward and down as I try to lift that knee by pressing my back foot into the ground. We're going to shoot for about 3 to 5, and you can add more later if needed. Then we do the opposite. I draw my hip back with a bit of a hinge in the hip, and I try to lift the foot of the back leg. You can see my internal rotation is not as good. I'm still using that outer glute to lift that foot, and I want to make sure that front knee doesn't come off the ground as well. Once I've done the internal and external, I switch and do the same thing on the other side. Again, making sure we're leaning at an angle if we need to, not leaning directly forward. The fifth and last thing we want to talk about is our feet. So I'm going to do this standing facing a pole, holding onto the pole about chest height. My feet are squeezing together and I'm tucking my hips under. So I'm not letting my booty stick out, I'm really tucking the hips under. For starters, I'm just going to press into the ball of one foot and then drive the heel back down. Same thing on the other side. So as I do this, I'm not letting my foot sickle. My knee is coming forward, I'm pressing through the ball of the foot. I want this inside line straight. As I drive the foot back down, I don't want to think about just dropping it down. I want to think really push up into that ball and really push down. So if you were looking at this from the front, you could see my hip come up and then really hike up as I drive down. Once we've done this a couple of times on each side and we're comfy with it, again, holding an object, it could be a pole next to you or in front of you for these. I'm tucking the hips, pulling in the rib cage, squeezing the heels together and squeezing my booty so my butt cheeks are squeezing together. My thighs should be touching. I'm thinking of lifting and driving into the ball of the foot. I'm not not letting my ankles sickle. I'm pushing those heels together and then coming back down. If your ankle bones are smacking together, bring your toes apart a little bit for a slight external rotation, but we still want to push up into the ball of the foot, pulling the heels forward for that external rotation. As we get comfy with these, tucking the hips, squeezing the booty, we want to shift the upper body forward so that as we push up, the weight is stacked, and then we really just want to tap the heel and come back up. In ballet, we call these élevés. You can also add a plie for a relevé, but we really want to make sure that we're doing these with the ankles straight for ankle stability. Now you can also do these from an actual plie, and if you're doing edge work, when you come into your plie, you can drop a heel, straighten, straighten, which can really help with that ankle stability. So there you have it, 5 simple things you can be doing to make sure that your shoulders, hips, and feet are warmed up and ready to do whatever type of movement you're doing. If you'd like more information on how to warm up your body, condition, or do some acrobatic movements, hop on over to studioxpresents.com and check out our on-demand tutorials and our online studio. As always, please stay safe with your training.